This is Norman Adams, the associate pastor of the Fellowship Free Will Baptist Church. Many have called the Fellowship Church a miracle church. I believe it is a miracle church because it has a miracle pastor. The work at Fellowship has been accomplished because the Lord has used a man who has no education. I have seen the work grow from a small number to the great work it is today. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you my friend and God's man, Reverend Lonnie Graves, who will be preaching on the subject, The Life of a Gypsy Before and After Conversion. This message was preached and recorded in the main auditorium of the Fellowship Free Will Baptist Church of Durham, North Carolina.
It's not so strange to find a miracle work today connected with the Lord Jesus Christ, is it? Did you know that every church ought to be a miracle church? You know that? Every church ought to be a miracle church. In one sense, every Christian is a miracle person. Did you know that? Did you know the greatest miracle that the Lord Jesus Christ has ever done? Thank God He does it in this church about every service. What is the greatest miracle ever performed? When the Lord takes a wicked sinner, transforms his life, and causes that sinner to become a child of God, born of the Spirit of God, anointed by the Spirit of God, sent forth with the message of the gospel of Christ. Every child of God ought to be a witness to the grace of God. Every saved person is a miracle. The greatest miracle ever performed is when God takes a sinner. God takes a drunk. God takes a harlot. God takes a self-righteous man and transforms his life and causes that man or that woman to honor and glorify God. Oh, that's a miracle. If you are a born-again child of God, if you know what it means to be saved, you can say, my life is a miracle. I know that God performs greater miracles in the lives of some. I know that. I know that it's not so strange to find that we have a miracle work here, right out in the middle of the country. Can't hardly find it. Some folks, you give them directions how to get there, and they can't find it yet. And it's not their fault. It's because it's so hard to get here. Miracle folks are saved in this church and their lives transformed. This work is a miracle work because we believe in the miracles of the Bible. We believe that Jesus Christ can perform miracles because, you see, the first miracle that I ever knew anything about, before I even knew one verse in the Bible, I realized and recognized the miracle of the new birth. I realized and recognized the transforming power of God. Now, neighbor, if you are in a church where this transforming power is not experienced and not felt, then neighbor, listen, you're just playing religion. You're playing church. There is an experience that every sinner can have with God that'll transform his life. I know this. More than you realize, I know this. I feel like that I can say with Paul, I was the chiefest of sinners. My birth was a miracle. Well, it's a miracle that I was even a healthy child. I was born on an old iron bed, wired together with baling wire, in a gypsy tent, 12 foot wide and 12 foot long, with an awning across the front end of it, something like you put on a trailer. Only one bed. I slept on the bed with a mother for a year. Then I was transferred to the ground. I slept on the ground for 14 years. I only had as my bed a piece of canvas that was put on the bare, hard ground. And on top of that canvas, a quilt. You know what a quilt is, I'm sure. Another quilt was rolled up, and I used that as a pillow. I slept that way 14 years. I never knew what it was to have a white sheet. Why, I never even knew what it was to have a bath in a bathtub. I never even saw the inside of a bathroom all those years. We lived like animals. Never knew what it was to see a shower. Never knew what it was to have steak to eat. We lived off of beans and potatoes and sausage and hamburgers, stuff like that. It was a miracle that I survived the first year. It was a miracle that I survived sleeping on the grounds where the snakes would crawl, where the spiders would come and snug up to me at night. Sometimes I'd get so cold I'd welcome some creature to sleep beside her. You see, my entire life was that of a dog eat dog. Survive if you can. Love no one. Live for yourself. Live if somebody else has to die in order for you to live. No wonder when I went into the armed service, I was one of the most bloodthirsty persons they had in the Army. No wonder, as a young man, 19 and 20 years old, in World War II, I shot men down in cold-blooded murder and laughed at them while they died. No wonder I could take and rob a man while he was bleeding to death, begging me to get him a doctor, because I was raised with a hard heart, as hard as a stone. From beginning, ever since I could remember, it was survive, just do the best you could. From even as a little child, I never knew what it was to have shoes, just a pair of pants and a shirt. I only can remember owning one coat in my life. And it was a coat, and I wore it so long. So I wore it by that I mean I had it so long, until my arms growed out of the sleeves, and I'd walk around with my hands, my arms pulled up, ashamed for people to see, try to make the sleeves fit my arms. At 10 years old, I could play draw poker and stud poker and blackjack as good as any man. I'd sit down with any grown man. If he didn't watch out, I'd take him. That's the way I made my money. I'd get these suckers and get them in poker games and take their money. At 11 years old, I could shoot dice so good they'd make me buck the dice against a wall because I could set them in my hand and trip them out. I was taught from almost birth to do the next man. Do before you get done. At 12 years old, I drank my first bottle of beer. My dad gave it to me. I got drunk on that first bottle of beer. My dad. At 13 years old, I found my brother one day, brothers drinking White Lightning. And they made me drink some of it so I couldn't tell on them. And I got drunk and got sick. I'll never forget it because when we got into it, it was burnt liquor. It was old stump liquor, and it was burnt. And the cork, we had a cork in it. We got so drunk we couldn't get the cork and pushed down the bottle, and we picked it out, and most of the cork got down in the bottle. And every time you take a swig of White Lightning, you'd get some cork. And I'll tell you, that was the sickest sick I ever been in my life. I'll tell you, I thought I was going to die and didn't care much if I did. 13 years old. At 14 years old, I took the spring off of a screen door, old country house, the spring that pulled a screen door in. I doubled it up, made me a hole in the ground, melted me some lead, poured around that spring, bought me a dime roll of tape and taped it up and made me a blackjack kill any man. And I'd have killed a man with it if I'd have got a chance. Just think about it now. At 14 years old, at 15 years old, I took a toy pistol and made a .22 pistol out of it. With that .22 pistol, we shoot one dime. And then you have to take a knife, pull out the shell, and put another in. I shot that thing several times. One day I shot it and it blew up my hand. But I shot it many times. At 16 years old, I robbed my first store. I didn't care for no one. No one cared about me. Why should I care for anybody else? I never knew what it was to hear the name of God until Dad got mad. I heard the name Jesus one time and heard somebody talking about a fellow walked on water. And I tried to figure out how he'd do it. I said he must have built a platform and under the water, slipped it out, and when the daylight come or the tide come in or something, he'd walk around on the water. My dad used to fix cook stoves for a living. And it was really comical how he'd go around the cook stoves. People would burn wood in them. The stoves would burn out. And my dad would go and say, well, now we can fix your stove. And I remember that many times he'd fix a stove and didn't even need fixing. I remember Dad would look for the big, nice stoves, the Home Comfort, Majestic ranges. They were special types of stoves. Rich people owned them. They were made out of sheet metal, and they would rust. And Dad would find out where one was at, ask the neighbors, somebody would tell him, and he'd go to the house and pretend that he was a representative from the Home Comfort factory coming to investigate the stove that'd been sold to them. Why, naturally, they let him in. He'd say, I'm from the Home Comfort Range Company in St. Louis, Missouri. I think you bought one of our stoves. Well, yes, we did get a Home Comfort stove. We've come to inspect it. My dad would walk in, look the stove over, and snap his fingers, and well, I found another one. The man said, another what? He'd say, don't it use a lot of wood? Anybody who carried wood for a stove, they thought so, don't you think? And the thing about it is, yes, it used a lot of wood. Dad'd say, well, look here. Now, see these cracks where the stove's put together? Why, these cracks are supposed to have been sealed at the factory. Well, at the factory, there was a little cement stuck in them. It had come out a little while. Didn't mean anything. Just made them look better. Dad said, oh, this stove's going to burn out, and something's got to be done. Scared the man to death. Or the woman, whoever's talking to. Maybe the stove wasn't but a year old. Well, what am I going to do? Well, you send it back to the factory, we'll fix it. Now, who is going to take the stove out and ship it back to the factory and get it fixed? I wouldn't, would you? If they had little enough sense to ask Dad how long it would take, Dad would make sure that, he said take about 5 weeks. Who's going to do it out of cook stove 5 weeks? So, all right, well, what am I going to do? Well, we could fix it. Here, we have the material, but we'd have to charge you and you get a rebate from the factory. Well, you can see that, can't you? How much? Well, it cost you 15 cents an inch. Dad couldn't write his name, couldn't figure 15 cents and 15 cents. But he knew already how much he was going to charge her. He'd sized her up and figured out how much money she had. He'd inspected the house as he walked through it, seen how many chickens you had in the yard and all that sort of stuff. And it depended on how much she could afford. That's how much it was. $6.95, $8.95. I don't know why he always said 95, but he always did. And so he'd fix it. You know what he would do? Take a 25-cent can of stove cement, stick his finger down it, and get some on his finger and push it down the crack. It'd take him 5 minutes. 25 cents. Well, he was a gypsy. He's supposed to do that, wasn't he? He used to sell linoleum rugs. He'd buy a big bunch of linoleum rugs and go into the country, and he'd cut these things up in strips. My dad, he would go through the country, and he'd stop somebody's house and say, good evening, lady. We from so-and-so rug company, and we've just put linoleum rugs. That's a long time ago. Didn't have too much carpet then. And we used to just put linoleum rugs in all the floor, all the rooms in the Durham Hotel. My, that would impress the lady. And he said we had a few copies left, and the boss man told her to sell them out at wholesale price. Now, here she sits. She's been feuding with that lady next door for a long time, because that lady next door, she bought a 1922 car, you know, and she didn't like it. And she's been wanting to get a jump on her for a long time. Now her mind starts to working. And you mean I can buy wholesale the same kind of rug that the big hotel uptown's got in it? Boy, how much? Well, it depends on how she said how much, you see. If her eye looked very greedy, she got stuck good. But Dad would sell them, it depends on, 6 by 9, 6 by 12, and he'd sell them $11, or $umpteen, or $4, $11, something like that. And Dad would give her a price. Now, do you know what that linoleum rug was? Nothing in the world but something Daddy bought for a little nothing. And a tar paper with sprayed pattern on it. Why, it'd wear out in 3 weeks. But we're gypsies. We were gypsies. Now, remember, we were taught this from birth, almost. Taught to gyp people. That's where the name come from, gypsies, I think that's where it comes. Everybody said, where did gypsies come from? I don't know where I come from. All I remember, one day I was there. I remember I went to work for a man one time, and he told me, he said, Lonnie, he said, I want you to make money honest. If you can't make money honest, just make money. I said, I know about that. I've been doing that for years, you see. And the thing about it is, I remember, I'll tell you this real quick. My dad had one gimmick nobody else had. Somewhere he found you could buy eyeglasses. Dad found a place you could buy them by the dozen, and it would cost him 15 cents a pair. That's all. They were brass, a little bit of magnifying in them. That's all it was. And Dad would keep them in his pocket all the time. And everywhere he'd go, if he saw a man at 40 years old or older, he would stop and get up a conversation with him. And he'd ask him where was the little 5-mile town and nothing else. And in the midst of the conversation, he said, by the way, sir, I can see him today. By the way, sir, I was down at the schoolhouse, whatever building he just passed down the road, or country store, yesterday, and I picked up a pair of glasses. They look like they're gold. Look like they're brand new. I don't need them. Everybody wants a deal. You mess with a gypsy, you get a deal. And he said, and before that guy would know it, my dad had a trick, and he could slap them glasses on a man's face before we could say scat. And he'd have those glasses on that guy's face and throw some reading up, and it was a little magnifying ability. And he said, whoa, I can see good. Dad said, they look like they're gold. Well, anybody knows brass looks like it's gold, don't they? See? And Dad said, I'll sell them to you real cheap. Oh, the guy looked at him. How much? Dad had a set price on those. He'd say, $3. Now, anytime you buy something for 15 cents and sell it for $3, that's making pretty good money. Right? And he sold those things everywhere. But every once in a while, he'd find a crook that's more of a crook than he was. You can imagine, can't you? My dad would say, I found these glasses down at the schoolhouse. You mean back down the road? Yeah. Well, I'm glad you found them. They're mine. They're mine. Hey, that's happened many times. That's happened many times. Now, what do you suppose Dad would do? He'd look right pious. He'd say, well, sir, I'm glad I found them. You wouldn't mind give me $1 for finding them, would you? Now, I'll tell you what, if you buy something for 15 cents instead of $1, that's pretty good profit. And when those glasses turned green, he knew he got a deal. See, he knew he got a deal. Well, we're gypsies. I could go on and tell you many, many things. The life of a gypsy, how we lived in the tent. I remember one time we pulled up the side of a river. And, you know, it'd be wonderful if we had some lady folks like my mother. Some of you folks met my mother. She was down here, you know. And my mother's an old-fashioned woman. Boy, I'm telling you, when she said scat, she meant move, see. And we pulled up beside this river, and we're parking about dark. My dad got out and went up to the town to get some groceries. And he went across a ferry, a place that, a boat, you know, to go across the river. And he was going, it done turned dark. In the meantime, some folks got down on the river cutting up. And they had some kind of a drunken party, and they were just talking pretty nasty. And my mother, I can see her today, she stepped out of the tent, and she said, hey, down there. Thing got quiet. She said, we got some children up here. How about you folks keep it a little quieter? Ha, 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 ha. They began to laugh. When they stopped laughing, Mother said, I can see her today, she said, all right, down there. One more cackle like that, and I'm going to put a hole through somebody. And I remember what some old sorry woman said. She come back and yowled again. I could see my mother today. She said, James, look a little yaga manger. Now, to you country folks, she said, James, go and get the gun. And it's about dusty dark. She didn't say another word. He handed that big 32 Smith & Wesson with about an 8-inch barrel. She drawed that thing back and cocked it with that hand up her ear, and when she straightened that arm out, that thing it was sort of automatic. When she straightened that arm out, that thing went off, and I'll tell you, a streak of fire come out of the front of that thing. I looked at me like three yards wide. Ka-wham! And when she did, she saw a tree shake. And when she did, she tried to shoot that tree down. She shot 6 times right down. I don't know if she killed anybody or not. But she was trying. She was trying. Now, listen, she meant business, boy. Well, you know, you folks talk about telling fortunes. My aunt, I had Aunt Maggie, and I'll tell you what, bless her heart, she could tell fortunes. Listen, did you know I can tell you fortune? If I wanted to. But I won't, because I believe that's wrong, see? That's wrong. Now, listen, the way that most folks tell fortunes is just by elimination, see? You have 2 girls. Young boy says, I do? Yeah, that tickles him to death. Yeah, I do? Yeah, you have one lives on a plane, one lives on a hill, and when he sparkles, you know that's the one he likes, and he thinks of a girl, you say, and when his eyes sparkle, you say, the one on the hill likes you best. Well, that's what he wanted to hear, you see, because he thought of a girl lives on a hill he liked. You see, he tells his own fortune. My aunt she could listen. She was pretty good at it. I remember one time, see, what we would do, we'd find folks that had mysterious and superstitious minds. She found a dear old lady one time, and she was sort of sickly and had a superstitious mind, and she visited with her several weeks, and she found out she had $700. And $700. Listen, I make a long story short. She convinced that dear old soul that somebody buried an evil spirit in her backyard. And she could kill that spirit. Whoever heard of that? But she told her, when she worked it up till she visited her several times, she told her to tie the $700 around her neck and wear it a week in a bag. She did. She came back, and on the way back, the old lady got her water from a spring. My aunt found all this out, see. Spring is where the water comes out the side of the mountain, you know. Well, she had her driver to stop by and get some poke salad berries. Some of you know what that is, a little red berries. Got a lot of real red stuff in them. And he took those berries and put them in a little old bag and crushed the bag. Crushed the bag up real good. And when my aunt went to the house, he went down, dropped the bag in the spring. My aunt come in and said, I've killed the spirit. She said, to prove it to you, your spring is going to be running blood. Going to be running blood. Oh, my. She took her down side of the hill. Well, sure, her spring looked like it run blood. She put all that red stuff in it. When that old gal got down side of the hill, that spring was red, and it was red all day. But it colored the whole side of the hill where the stuff was going down. She got her $700. She got her $700. And I could go on. But we had many heartaches. I remember one time, all we did was eat and sleep, and I slept in the front seat of a car 4 years. The front seat of a car for 4 years. I never forget it. And I used to look out at the people who lived in the houses, and I wondered what folks did in the houses. I wondered what it meant to live in a house with a roof over your head. I wondered if there was really a God or somebody above the stars. I wondered if somebody cared for someone like me. People would look down upon me. No one would have anything to do with me. I remember one time I took a kite out of a tree where boys had lost it and left it up in the tree, and I climbed up and got the kite. And those boys went and got their dad, and I put the kite together, and the dad come back and kicked me and bruised me, and just like he's kicking on an animal. Well, they looked upon me just like I was an animal. I remember one time I begged for a scooter, the red scooter. I saw it and I begged for it, and I wanted that scooter. And when Christmas time come, I got a little old drum. I didn't get no scooter. And I said, yeah, nobody cares for me. I'll get even with this world one day. And I was being prepared then to be a wicked man. I went to church one time my whole life before I came to this city. Whole life. I was in Harlan County, Kentucky. In Harlan County, Kentucky, I'd been trying to court a little girl. She wouldn't have anything to do with me. One day I tried to get her to go off that night, and she said, all right, I'll go off with you under one circumstances, one condition. I said, what's that? She said, you go with me to revival meeting. I said, go with you where? She said, a revival meeting. I said, what's that? She said, it's church. I said, okay, we'll go to church. So we went to church. I picked her up, we went to church. Took my little kid brother, tagged along. I'd been sitting in the church a little bit on side of a hill in Harlan County, Kentucky, mean place. Little old sort of a stoop-like porch on the outside of that church, and stairs going down the side of the church to the ground. And I'd been in about 10 minutes, somebody punched me on the back. And I looked around, and some mean-looking man said, you won't on the outside. I said, all right. I got up and said, I'll be back in a minute. I was about 15, 16, and maybe 14, I forgot. But I went to the doors. I walked to the door. I looked, and I didn't like what I saw. There's a big red-faced, freckle-faced fella standing right in front of the door, out against the railing there. Another fella standing on the left-hand side, another one down on the steps. When I got to the door, that big guy straightened up, and he threw his finger up at me and said, you might as well come on. You might as well come on and get it. I said, get what? He said, you know. Well, I had a pretty good idea. Good. I didn't know what it's all about. But all of a sudden, I didn't want what he was going to give me. So I went back and sat down. I sat down beside that gal. And I said, hey, there's a big red-faced, freckle-faced guy out there who wants me bad. You know anything about it? I can see her today. She giggled like a chicken. She said, that's my boyfriend. I'm telling you, boy. That's my boyfriend. I thought I'd die. Listen, I called my kid brother over. I motioned for him to come over. And, boy, I'll tell you, I was glad he tagged along. I got him over there close to me. And I said, now, you listen. This is what I said. I said, you Mook and Lil Robert. And you put him to Little Yogamaker and Hobbadrum and Lil Mandy. That's what I said, boy. That's exactly what can you guess what? You want to say it again? I said, you, Mook and Lil Robert, put him to Lily Yogamanger and Hobbadrum and Lil Mandy. You want me to tell you what it says? I said, you go get Robert, my big brother. You go get Robert. You tell him to get the gun and come and get me. That's what I said. That's right. Bless your heart. Time me to leave. And so my little brother took off, and all of a sudden I got interested in that preacher. I was afraid he was going to say, and finally now, or in conclusion, and I'd have dropped through the floor. And so, lucky it was, he was a long-winded preacher like me sometime. And so he kept on, and directly I felt another punch. I said, uh-oh, this is it. And when I heard that familiar voice says, Hobbadrum, that when my kid brother come back, and that meant come on. I grabbed that little chicken by the wing. I said, come on, Toots, we leaving now. Yes, sir. Out I went. When I got out the door that time, there was another figure had sort of emerged in the situation, and on the left-hand side, where the other guy had been leaning, was a familiar face. My brother was standing over there, leaning against the rail, with his arms crossed, something like that Indian across in front of him. And I know what that meant. As I stepped through that door, that big old guy straightened up, and when he did, my brother, I could see him, he dropped his left hand down and twisted his right arm straight around, and that big, shiny 32 Smith & Wesson was sticking right straight in that guy's face. He said, Miss Fella, you looking for something? And all of a sudden, that guy wasn't looking for nothing. Well, I tell you one thing, brother. You can have churches, because the only time I ever went to church, my brother had to come get me with a gun. And I didn't want no more of it. Make a long story short, as short as I can, Army Day, they was talking about Army and drafting, and they said, you got to go register. And I went and registered, and I don't remember what I did. But anyway, you know what it did? They drafted me in the Army. I couldn't even write my name. They said, here's a questionnaire, whatever it was, fill it out. Well, I said, I'm sorry. I got a bruised finger. I sprung it playing ball. I can't even bend it. I said I couldn't write. Well, I sort of liked the idea of the Army. I looked at all those clothes those guys wearing, those starch uniform. Man, I like that deal. And so all of a sudden, I thought I want to go to the Army. Give me a gun? I like that deal. And he said, you can't move it? I said, no, sir, man, it's all swelled up, look at there. Well, imagination, I guess. I said, you give me the questions, I'll tell you what they are. And so he asked me a few questions, I gave him the answer. I've always wondered what was my IQ. I've always wondered. I don't know what. But anyway, before I knew what it was all about, they said, raise your right hand. I raised my right hand. He said, repeat after me. And they said something, and I said something, and they said, you in the Army now. They gave me some clothes, and they gave me something I've never seen before. I'll tell you, yeah, they sure did. They gave me the funniest little old short pair of breeches you ever did see. I tell you. And they gave me a shirt, didn't even have no arms in it, boy. I'll tell you. And they wrapped that stuff. I said, what in the world I'm going to do this? And it was night when I got through. I went stumbled into the barrack, and there was a bed. The sergeant said, find your bed and put your stuff on. And I found me a mattress and put the stuff on. I said, my, that looks nice. Mattress on the springs, and there I laid my stuff. I looked over on the side, and there was the prettiest thing you ever seen in your life. My, it was a mattress there, all covered over with a woolen blanket, and folded up at the front end of that stuff was the prettiest white things. I just checking through my stuff, and I found I had some of them things. Prettiest white cloth you ever did see. Man, I folded that stuff up real careful. I said, good gracious, if I mess this up, I'll be shot. I'll be shot. I folded that stuff up just as careful as you. I put it on the side. I got those, I checked, and I found I had 2 blankets. I said, well, this must be it. And I saw the other guys running to the back room. They grabbed an armful of stuff, run, and directly, the one came out. That nut had that stuff on. Yeah. And so I watched them a little bit, and I grabbed my stuff, then I went. I went in there, and they were turning buttons, and water was coming out of the wall. Yeah, and so I turned me on a button. I'll tell you, boy, I like to scold myself. I come out, I knew what I was learning. I knew what I had. That was what they called must have been. And so I had mine on, and I had my pajamas on, low neck and no arms and those little old short pants on. And I said, boy, this is something. Got something to sleep in. I didn't know you wore them things all the time. Well, I went out, and I put my blanket on that bed, and I put another blanket on top, and I went to bed. And I won't tell you, if you want a bad night's sleep, you just get in a bed in your underwear and sleep on a blanket under you and a blanket on top of you, woolen to death. That was the worst night's sleep I ever had in my life. It like to itch me to death that night. Well, listen, I got up next morning, I found out all about it, and I just wished I had more time to tell you. But I went in the Army. I was the best soldier they had. Well, man, I wanted to make good. After the training was over, everybody else shipped out, and there I was. I thought, they found out about me. And then everybody else gone. I was sitting around. One day the sergeant came by and smiled. He said, okay, Corporal, follow me. I looked around, and he said, come on, Grace. I said, you said Corporal. He said, that's you. I said, you mean it? Yeah, man, that'll make a corporal out of me. And said, you're going down to K Company, and you're going to be an instructor. I said, I am. They took me down to K Company and said, now the next batch is going to come in tomorrow. You're going to train them. I said, boy, this is something. I'm a boss man. That lasted about 3 weeks. One day the general found out I couldn't write my name. He said, how'd you get in this Army? I said, it won't easy. He said, go back to the barrack. And the next day they come by, and the sergeant reached up to my arm, and them pretty little stripes on my arm, he jerked them off. Go wham! He said, you come in here under fraud. He said, you ain't nothing but a bum. Well, I knew that all my life. I don't know what happened. Somebody got mad at me because in 3 weeks' time I was on a ship going overseas. That's right. Went in on D-Day. I was a platoon runner. The guy come back, they meeting opposition. The guy came back with a Luger. Another guy came back with a watch. I said, boy, this is a deal. I said, Captain, all of a sudden I don't like this job being your runner. I told out what action is. I wanted some of that stuff. He said, you want to fight a war? I said, yes, sir. He said, Sergeant, this man wants to get in on it. Do something for him. They made me first scout. Now, those who don't know anything about the Army, that's the first man that moves when you start the war. They went out. The first morning I was a scout. I went right out in the middle of the field, and when I did, lo, I'm telling you, that's when we found the Germans. I found them first. I laid out there all day in the hot sun, counting the bullets going over my head. They were shooting all around me, boy. I couldn't move my... And when nighttime come, I finally crawled in. I said, Sergeant, if I'd have moved my eyebrow, it'd have killed me. He said, I thought you'd been dead a long time ago. I tell you the truth about it, I like to die of a heart attack. I said, now that won't work. I knew I'd get killed. Give me something else. I was young. He said, okay, here. And he dropped a bazooka on one arm. I weighed 135 pounds and some shells on the other side. And I was just wobbling through. And we made another attack, and we got cut off by a machine gun. He said, hey, they said, bazooka man. And I stood looking like a nut, and the sergeant said, that's you. I said, me? He said, yeah, there's bazooka man. I said, I'm no bazooka man. He said, you got the bazooka, use it. The sergeant said, see that building? There's a machine gun in there. He's done killed 7 men over here. I said, I'm next. He said, maybe you can put a bullet in the end of it. I said, I'll try. Bullets flying everywhere, and I crawled down, and I wired that thing up. I wound up, shut my eyes, and shot. When I did, the whole end of the building fell out. I looked at that thing, and I smiled. You know what they call me? The Kid Bazooka Man. They couldn't keep me enough ammunition for that thing. Why, I got in a fight with a tank, and I won the battle. Anything get in front of me, a man get in front of me, I'd shoot him with a bazooka for anybody else, kill him with a rifle. Then, when I got through with that war, I had so many ribbons and so many medals. Why, I had them out here one day. Medals all over the place. They gave me the Bronze Star, the Silver Star, the Arrowheads, and I don't know what all. There's all kinds of stuff. Got everything but a good conduct medal. I couldn't get it. Came back to Durham. Oh, time is gone. Time is gone. To make it as short as I can, neighbors, I began to build a house. Bought me a land and started building a house. I'd go around and look at somebody else building a house. Come back and build mine a little bit. One day, well, I don't want to get too far ahead. Bear with me just a minute. I went out on Sunday and began to dig the foundation. A man next door come over and said, "Fella, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm building a house." He said, "On the Lord's day?" I said, "On whose day?" It was on Sunday. It's on the day I didn't work. And he said, "Besides, you got to square it up." And I said, "I got to do what?" He said, "You got to square it up." I said, "You know how?" He said, "Yes." He said, "You come back tomorrow evening, I'll help you with it." And I was tired, didn't know what I was doing, so I said, okay. I come back next day, and he had the sticks all up and had to square it up. Did you know I built that house? My wife and I built that house. And built it. We borrowed and stole the money. She didn't know I stole the money, but I stole a lot of the money to build it with. Had she left me. And but we built a house and got everything on credit, and I went to the bank and borrowed the money and paid it off. One day while I was building that house, a nut from over across the street came over. He had a little old apron around his midsection and had pockets in it. And the first thing he did was walked over and smiled and said, "Hi!" Then I reached down the sack of my nails and took a whole handful of my nails and put them in his little pocket thing. I like to hit him with a hammer. And the first thing you know, he stuck a nail down and began to drive. I said, "Hold everything, man. I'm putting down subfloor." I said, "That can't pay you." He said, "No pay needed. He began to sing, "Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound." I said, "Well, he's a crazy man." He began to nail nails, and all of a sudden, he missed that nail and skinned his hand. Whoo, he just busted the thing wide open. And when he did, I knew I had a nut. Because he grabbed his hand and looked at the blood in his spine. He said, "Bless God, I ruined my hand." I knew he had gone crazy. I knew. And about 5 minutes later, I hit my hand. I said some things, too. I said something. He didn't tell me. He didn't fuss at me. He just went ahead and he helped me build a house. But, he kept talking to me about going to church and going to Sunday school. I said, "No, thank you for some." Because, you see, I went to school one day. Went to school 3 days. Did you know I went to school 3 days? I really did. I went to school, and I was about 12. The teacher told me I got it all right in the first day. The next day, she said, "Here's your assignment. You learn how to write 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I said, "That's hard." I went back and told Dad, I said, "She wants me to write down 2, 4, 6. She don't want me to just learn it. She wants me to learn how to write it down." Daddy said, "I think I can teach you that." I said, "I can't learn it." He said, "Yes, you can." I said, "No, I can't." Well, after about 2 sticks and 2 hours later, I decided I could learn it. And he liked to beat me to death, but I learned it. I went back to school. Had to beat me just about death. That's next day. That's the second day. The third day I went back to school. She said, "Recess." I said, "What?" "That's when you go out and play." So I went out and played. It was hot. And I saw the big tree, and it's all waving in the wind up. I said, "The wind up there." Boy said, "You better leave that tree alone. She'll kill you." I said, "She ain't told me not to go back." I got on top of the tree, and I swing back and forth. And she come out, and she said, "Lonnie, come down." Oh, I'm telling you the truth about it. That school's rough. That school's rough. She liked to beat me to death. I went home. I said, "Daddy, I'm going to get killed anyway." I quit. I said, "Your mama going to kill me." I said, "Between you and her, I'm going to get beat to death anyway." I quit. And I did. I didn't go back. So when that guy started talking to me about going to Sunday school, no, thank you for some. I just had any. We moved into that house. house the very next Sunday morning after we moved in. My little girl, and I had done married and had my little daughter, and she is 3 years old then. She come up to me on Sunday morning and began to pull at the cover and said, Daddy, I want to go to Sunday school. I said, leave me alone. And she went back. Next Sunday morning, somehow I got up early. And she said, Daddy, I want to go to Sunday school? See, my mother-in-law had been taking her to Sunday school. I'd been living with mother-in-law for all her life. My mother-in-law had been taking her to Sunday school. I knew she'd been going all summer on Sunday morning, but I was oversleeping over a hangover and sleeping. I didn't know where she's going. She'd been going to Sunday school. I said, no. All the people been asking me. Oh, my wife. She said, now, Lonnie, they've been nice to you. Them church people been helping you and all this, and you ought to go one time. I said, now, look at here. I've got all the school I want. She said, but Sunday school's different. I said, Monday school, Sunday school's all same difference. School is school. I got all I wanted. 3 days, all I wanted. She said, but it's different. I said, it's got to be school to school. She said, try it one time. I don't know why she didn't say, let's go. She said, you go. Well, I said, fix me up, and she dressed me. She dressed me up, and I said, give me my pencil and my paper. She said, you won't need it. I said, school, give me my pencil and my paper. So I went off to school, and I said, I guess you know this, don't you? I'll take the assignment when they give it to me. I'll pretend I'm writing it down. I'll get along all right, but you better be sorry for the guy that asked me for the assignment back. Because he's going to get my fist right in his face. That's right. And neighbor, listen, I'd have done it. I'd have beat somebody to death. I walked inside the church, and they grabbed my little girl, and off they went with her. And I said, uh-oh, they got my young'un. They got me young'un. I got to be careful. I went into a big classroom, and they were just as nice to me as they could. Set me back in the corner, and for a solid 30 minutes, that gal got everybody else there and told me all about Jesus and how much God loved me, and I never heard it before. And I went home after Sunday school, told my wife, I said, my, all them people's crazy. And I said, but I'm going back next week. I want you to go. We're going a little early. I said, we're going to sit on one side. I slipped in a little early, and I got on the other side, because I figured that old gal had that one place zeroed in. That's all she talked about. She had her mind set on that one seat, and I wasn't going to sit there a whole 30 minutes. I said, I like what you said, but I didn't want to talk to me all the time. So I said to the other side, but what I didn't know, it seems like, is she switched sides every week. Every week. And she talked on this side. Everywhere I sat, brother, she just forgot everybody else there. She talked about me. I got so full of conviction, I thought I'd gone crazy. They started talking about something else. They said, we're going to have revival. I said, uh-oh. Uh-oh, revival? No, sir. And you know what they had revival? And they taught me an ocean coming. That little old cocky fella stood in the pulpit. He talked about me worse than you talk about a dog. I knew somebody told him all about me. And he made me man enough to fight a wildcat. When that service is over, I said, nobody talks about a man. I said, you look straight at me, and you're not going to get away, nobody. When you come out, I'm going to be waiting for you. And I went to the front door, and I stood right there. I said, got to come out. And when he does, I'd have killed him. I'd have beat him to death. But you know what? He went out the back door. He went. The next day, I was mad all day. And I said, I'm going back tomorrow night just to get that guy. And I come back the next night and sat there, and he was meaner that night than he was the night before. And I said, oh, boy, you can have your turn. The more you talk, the more I'm going to get you. I found out to where the back door was. When the service was over, I got to the back door. He went out the front door. I was about to go crazy. The next night at 6 o'clock, I opened the door, and guess who was standing there? I said, a man that'll do this has got to have a gun. He little old fella, he'd got to have a gun. He walked in, looked me straight in the face, said, son, you want to be saved? And I heard somebody say more than anything in the world. I didn't know it was me, but it was. Man, listen, all of a sudden I was crying. Never cried before in my life. I don't even believe I cried when they spanked me. You know? I mean, it's a little fella. Yes, sir. Listen, he shook me up. I said, more than anything in the world. He said, get down on your knees right here and ask God to save you. I said, ask what? He said, pray. I said, I never prayed in my life. He said, time you start. I said, I don't know how. He said, I'll help you. I'll help you. He got on his knees and read the plan of salvation, said, now say, Lord, come in my heart. And I prayed the sinner's prayer. He said, that's it. I said, that's what? He said, that's salvation. I said, I don't feel nothing. Don't feel nothing. I got up just cocky as I could be. He didn't argue. He said, will you come to church tomorrow night? I said, well, yeah, I will. No, tonight. Will you come tonight? I said, okay, I'll get dressed and I'll come. I come to church. I sat in the pew. When he got through preaching, he forgot everybody was there, come right straight to me, laid his hand on my shoulder and said, this is it. I knew what he was talking about that time. I hung on the pew, held on, shook my head and started crying. When by the time I was shook up so bad, I felt something on my right-hand side, and I looked over there, and this dear lady standing on my right-hand side crying. And I'd been stealing from her, robbing from her, and tears were dropping over her chin. She laid her hand on my arm and said, son, Lonnie, son, why don't you go? I couldn't take it no longer. I went out, stepped out, come to the prayer room, got on my knees. A man opened the Bible and she said, here's what the Bible says. Read it. I said, I can't read. First time I ever said that. I can't read. He read it to me, said, ask God to save you. I did. He said, that's it. I said, don't feel no different. Shook up. Didn't know anything about God. By the time I was ready to give it up, that lady had been teaching me walk through the door. She's all frail, and she was weather-beaten. She'd been fasting and praying for me 4 days and 4 nights. She said, son, has God saved you? And I began to cry. And I said, he said I'm saved. She went through the same plan. She said, Lonnie, son, that's all there is to it. I called her by name, and I bursted out with a different kind of cry. I said, do you mean to tell me that's all there is to it? You mean to tell me I lived in hell for 21 years, and this is all there was to it? You mean to tell me that I could have been saved when I was a 10-year-old boy if somebody told me how? That day I left there, and I said, God, I'll stop as many people as I can from going to hell. I'll tell the whole world that Jesus died, and he died for them. And whosoever believeth in him shall not perish, for whosoever calls upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. Sure, I get on television and cut the English language all to pieces, but I tell people how to be saved. Sure, I get on the radios and I make a fool of myself sometimes, but I tell people how to be saved. And I've seen thousands of people get saved, and I'm not through yet. And I'm here to tell you tonight that Jesus will save you. He'll take your old filthy heart and perform a miracle in you. He'll make you a child of God, put your feet on a solid rock, and give you something to live for. But you got to be willing to surrender your heart to him. You got to be willing to say, yes, Lord, I'll trust you. I believe you died for me. Oh, don't you want to do it? Don't you want to do it tonight, sinner? Don't you want to walk down this aisle, as we've seen hundreds do, and say, yes, I want this Savior. I believe he died for me, and I don't want to go to hell. I'll trust Jesus to save me. Don't you want to do it tonight? While our heads are bowed and our eyes are closed, you can do it right where you're sitting.